How's everybody doing? I'm really excited to be here at Manifesto and share the stage with some incredible people. I also know that I am the person standing between 400 of you and drinks and the reception hors d'oeuvres, so I'll make sure to keep it snappy for everybody. I'm here to bring together everything we've been talking about all day between growth, design, and analytics through the lens of the music industry. A little bit about myself. I work for Pandora, and I also work for Next Big Sound. We're a small company of about 22 people that were acquired about 4 months ago, and we're super excited to get our hands on all that fantastic Pandora data. We've been tracking sales, streaming, and social data for over 150,000 artists for the past 6 years, and it's that kind of experience that we bring to bear to provide context and predictions for the music industry. But I'm here to talk about a really big number, 1 trillion, or more specifically, 1,32,225,905,640 streams just in the first 6 months of 2015. That's an enormous number, and of course this isn't how it works, but that would represent about 150 different music streams for every man, woman, and child alive on this planet. Streaming is huge. It's growing and it's not going away. Last year, for all of 2014, so for another 6 months, we only tracked 434 billion streams in the past year or so. Things are growing gangbusters. Another big number for you is almost 14 billion. In the first 6 months of 2015, we tracked this many new fans, and again, that's like 2 new fans for everybody who's alive, so there's a ton of interaction still happening online for musicians and musicians' fans. This is based on followers, station ads, a whole bunch of other metrics that we track that represent engagement with a fan. So that's some context for the music industry. We're going to dive in a little bit and look at a couple kind of banner artists for 2015, including Mr. Fetty Wap. We got any Fetty Wap fans in the audience? Got a couple. All right. Fetty Wap, you can't escape him. He's definitely the artist of the summer. Trap Queen was only the 3rd song that he ever recorded. And from there, he's gotten over 200 million YouTube detections. It's really absolutely insane how popular this guy is. His album just debuted, number 1, top of the Billboard 200 chart. He's a really great example of a totally digitally native artist. He uploaded his first track on a SoundCloud, which he then moved on to debuting a video on YouTube. From there, the song picked up momentum, was got on Pandora, Spotify, the rest of the streaming outlets, and it wasn't until then that he finally started to break on terrestrial radio. He also has this incredible presence online, which has helped drive a lot of his numbers. He has over 1 million followers on Instagram. His social game is really, really fantastic. He is a master of the medium. He mixes really brilliantly like some personal things, pictures of his children, or hanging out with his crew with some more promotional items. Like if you look at this spike of 2 green on the green line here just after July 1st, the first spike came from Fetty taking pictures of him going skydiving, and then 2 days later he announced that his EP, My Way, was dropping. So really awesome balance, a great example of like how an artist is leveraging social media to keep fans engaged and interested. His Instagram handle, if anybody is interested, is Fetty Wap 1738. I confess I had to Google 1738 a couple weeks ago because I had no idea why he was shouting about that number. Apparently it's his favorite cognac. His whole crew, the Remy Boys, are named after his cognac. Go figure. Next up is Nicky Jam. Now, another question. Who here has heard of Nicky Jam? Really? All right. 1 voice in the audience. I didn't know who Nicky Jam was, but it turns out Nicky Jam is actually, statistically, the most popular artist on Facebook for 2015 so far. He added more than 5 million Facebook page likes since the beginning of the year, more than any other artist that we track on the system. I'd never heard of this guy. He's from Boston, moved to Puerto Rico. He had a beef all through the 2000s with some other reggaeton rapper named Daddy Yankee, moved to Colombia, and all of a sudden, his career's gotten huge. And he's another great example of somebody who knows how to really leverage social media to get his fans engaged. He was seeding his YouTube channel with a lot of like personal videos, some really like, in-depth behind-the-scenes sort of thing, and building up a fan base. And once he started to get serious about releasing new content, like his single El Perdón, you see the spike right after March the 1st, and then his fans keep coming back to listen to more music. He's not a flash in the pan. He's actually built an established fan base that keeps coming back for more and more content. And again, biggest guy on Facebook. He has more than 1 billion plays on YouTube for this year, which almost like, that's like Psy Gangnam Style territory for numbers. I'd never heard of the guy. So really interesting to like see what you can discover looking at, statistics and metrics about the music industry. But that's enough about some of the bigger names in the music industry. Now we're going to go into how can smaller artists grow, especially like using our platform, Next Big Sound. How can they see where they're performing well, see where opportunities might be, better understand their audience, and really get out there and grow online. But before we do that, we kind of have to understand like what does a small artist look like? Without any kind of context or information, it's hard to know really where anybody stands. So about 2 years ago, we dove in and did some research to understand like what were the different stages of an artist's career. Now, when we jumped in, we were really hoping that we might be able to find some really natural breakpoints as an artist kind of grew from being unknown to getting a record deal to releasing music to becoming like the next Beyonce. And truth be told, there weren't in the numbers any sort of like statistical thresholds that showed up. We have to back into these numbers to find out like where an artist might be on different social media like YouTube, like Facebook, like Twitter, based on different artist stages or different artist events that happen in their lives. So for us, we look at undiscovered artists as people or artists who have never had a record deal, they're just getting started, their numbers are pretty low on Facebook and Twitter. They represent about 90% of all the artists that we track on Next Big Sound. You move up to promising once you've released an EP, and you're probably working on an LP. An established artist is probably achieved, I'm trying to remember, gotten on a Late Show debut. A mainstream artist has probably charted on the Billboard 200, probably toward the top, much like our friend Fetty Wap has. And an epic artist is like a Beyonce, somebody who can count multi-platinum releases in their catalog. And of course, this is how the numbers work. Undiscovered artists represent the vast majority of the artists that we track, but they don't have that much attention. Flip it around, epic artists only represent 0.2% of all the artists that we track on Next Big Sound, but they get almost the vast majority of all the traffic and engagement and reach that we find too. So, with this kind of context, as a marketing person, as somebody at a label like Sony, I can use those thresholds to be able to kind of bucket artists, and then using some predictive scores that we have here is the likelihood score that an artist is going to chart on the Billboard 200. I can really, just through data very quickly, find out who might be some rising talent that I might want to work with, I might want to target, I might want to try to sign to my label. It's really incredibly powerful to be able to just use data and have intelligence that you can use to kind of back up that intuitive sort of knowledge about what is that next great sound. So we're going to dive into Arkells, who is on that list just back there, and I'm going to show you, some of the information that we provide in terms of analytics that will help them understand how they can grow. Arkells, one of the top-ranked promising artists in the system. I just looked up the numbers Tuesday, so they're really fresh. They're a Canadian rock band, and this is the top of the profile page that they might see on Next Big Sound. And what you can see is we have some top-line summary data science information that we hit users with right off the top of the bat. We talk about, what is their reach? How engaged are their fans? What trends do we see in their metrics in the past 7 days? And then what is that social stage that they're at? I really love the combination of the one-word descriptions and then these gauges that allow a user to glance at the page and understand intuitively, where are they doing well, like here, an audience engagement, and then where could they maybe shore up their numbers, like Arkel's numbers have been kind of stable for the past couple weeks. Zoom in, click through, and we have these natural language descriptions, what those statistics means. And I get so excited when I dive into these. It makes this kind of information so useful and so easy to understand, especially for people who aren't data literate, which isn't a knock against artists in any way. That's really the case that I found, most of my career as a designer, that most people get spooked by a bar graph. So here again, we provide the stage that Arkel's is at, promising. We see that they're promising because of their strength on YouTube video views, and we explain to the user, what the thresholds are that make them achieve that stage. And then finally, in the last sentence, we provide some kind of guidance about what that artist could do to try to move up their numbers, get into the next stage, grow their audience, and maybe get the attention of more labels or more advertisers. We do the same thing for metric trend here. Again, their trend has been stable for the past 7 days, and we dive into that data because immediately when people get these top line summaries of what they're doing, they want to hear about the numbers too. So the median change they've seen for the past 7 days is 7.5% increase, which is pretty good actually. Here we also tell Arkel's that they're performing best on Twitter, and that they've had almost 80 retweets per day for the last 7 days, which is 3 times as much as they've seen over the past half year. For me, or if I'm Arkel's, it's a huge signal that whatever I'm doing on Twitter is really working well. We also can dive into the engagement and understand what's going on there. And it's a similar story. Arkel's is really doing a good job on Twitter. They've had 250 some mentions per day over the past 7 days, which is 20 times as much as we expect from an artist with an audience of almost 42,000 followers. And that kind of context that we have, because we track every single artist that you've ever heard of and all the ones that you haven't also, it help artists and music makers understand where they're at in relative to the whole kind of galaxy of musicians out there. You can dive deeper too and get all the statistics that you want if you really want to look at your performance across all the engagement metrics that you might consider for your band. What I love about this is all the context that we're able to offer. First, by being able to allow an artist to benchmark themselves against a different artist and see how they're performing. Old Dominion was also on that list I showed you before, and you can see that some of their numbers are a parity. They're not too far apart on Twitter. Well, actually Arkel's is doing a lot better. Old Dominion's doing a little bit better on RDO. That kind of like one-to-one comparison is super, super helpful for kind of like adding some context to these metrics. You can also look at the percentile rank for Arkel's performance on all these different metrics, which is, again, the kind of context you can only provide if you're tracking all the different artists that exist out there. And this is a great moment because this is where a user comes in and can start to apply their intuitive judgment about where they should be spending their time to grow their numbers better. Like in one interpretation, Arkel's might look at this table and say, damn, I'm really rocking it on Twitter mentions. I'm doing Twitter right, let's keep going on Twitter. But you might also look further down the table and say, I'm not doing so well on Instagram. I probably could be doing as well as I am on Twitter and Instagram. Maybe I should spend a lot more time like taking more pictures behind the scenes when I'm out on the road and trying to engage my fans there to help grow my numbers, grow my audience, and do better as a band. We also, reveal numbers about how content is performing on channels. Here is Arkel's performance on Pandora, and it's another great story here. I might look at the top of this table and see that Book Club is #1, the strongest song that I have performing on Pandora, with almost 200,000 plays for the history that it's been up there. But if I look further down the table at leather jacket where the shadow of my head is next to, I can see that it's almost getting as many spins for the past week as book club. And this kind of information can really drive what an artist does on social media. You know, if I want to reveal like the background of the song or like cut some kind of acoustic sort of set with it, having this feedback about how content performing is, you know, a fantastic thing for bands and artists to know how to grow better on different media. We also have, you know, demo data. Everybody loves demographic data, and here we've got, you know, great visualizations that make it really easy to see in an instant how an artist is performing. So pretty evenly balanced, a little more male, younger female listeners, older male listeners, and you can see kind of the evidence that Arkells is a Canadian band because the top 3 cities for them are in upstate New York. Having this kind of information can be super helpful, especially for tour planning or knowing where you might be able to target listeners for, for an audience. I'm going to take a little detour. I'm going to throw up some big maps on the screen. One here is for Fetty Wap and his individual plays across the whole nation, artist station ads on Pandora for all time for every Zip 3 in the country. And it's really clear that Fetty Wap is doing a great job in the South. I mean, Mississippi is practically all green. Usually when you look at numbers like this, there's some noise, there's some variance, and you have to do some work to get the signal out of here, and I just cannot believe like how clear this message is. There's some other details too, like when you really zoom in. Looking at Florida, if I, as a user, was only looking at, you know, Florida-level statistics for Fetty Wap, I might see that he's performing well, but not that great. But when you can zoom in to a specific Zip 3 or city, Fetty's doing a great job in Tampa and Orlando, but he hasn't really cracked Miami, you know, quite as hard as he might. Just by way of explaining, each of these circles is sized by the total number of artist station ads that Fetty Wap has seen, and then I'm coloring the circles based on how the number of station ads indexes to the population of those different Zip 3s. So if it's red, there are less listeners than we might expect based on population, and green, there are more listeners than we might expect based on population. I was floored when I saw this map for the first time, and I wanted to see if I could pick out a very different artist from Fetty Wap that might also exhibit a really cool pattern. So I checked out Sleater-Kinney's numbers and couldn't believe how dramatically different the map was. There's some obvious patterns here that you would predict right off the bat. Huge in the Northwest. Almost every major city is lit up green with huge plays, and nobody outside of the cities was really listening to Sleater-Kinney. But when you zoom in, again, there's some really cool stories you might find here that, you know, in Texas, not a lot of attention except for Austin. You can see Nashville sticking out like a sore thumb here. Even though they're playing less in Nashville versus Atlanta, Atlanta is really under-indexing based on population for Sleater-Kinney. So, you know, these kind of maps can be just super powerful. I love looking at them. I love maps. And I love seeing them like huge on this screen. That's really rewarding. Next, that's for independent artists. Here's how some label managers might be able to use Next Big Sound to understand some growth opportunities. If we go back into Arkells, I'm looking at the past year of Twitter followers activity for Arkells, and I see an enormous spike in the middle of March. We also track millions, probably billions of events and associate them with all the different artists in our system, and it's really easy to drill in and discover that that night is when Arkells won a Juno Award for Group of the Year. Juno is a Canadian music award. Being able to look at metrics like this and understand what moves the needle is something that especially advertisers and, you know, music makers, but also, you know, artists too, just crave to understand, you know, what is actually having an effect. We can also add some context too and look at some of the other Juno Award winners and see what their honors, how they affected their social numbers. So we have Leonard Cohen up here in the green. He won for Album of the Year. No one on Twitter seems to really care, and he didn't see a spike at all that night. Kind of similar story, Michael Bublé was honored with a Fan Choice Award, and there was no detectable spike one way or another from that honor. But if we look at the red here, Alanis Morissette, she won an entry into the Canadian Musician Hall of Fame, and she also saw a huge spike. So, I mean, for me, what I would learn is that Canadians have a lot of pride in their music, which I think is fantastic. And finally, I'm going to talk about a little bit how advertisers use Next Big Sound and can see some growth opportunities through our platform. When we initially embarked on trying to work more with advertisers, we thought that the number one thing we'd be able to offer them is identification. You know, based on a certain demographic or maybe like a geographic profile, we could churn out, you know, a list of 10, 50, 200 different artists that we would feel confident are a good fit for what they need and really likely to succeed in the future. But what we learned was verification was actually the more powerful proposal for advertisers. Again, it's always cool. I love seeing this pattern come up over and over again. A lot of people in the advertising industry have made their whole careers on being able to like intuitively know who's a good fit, who's going to be the next big sound, and to come to the table with some, you know, data and information that says, no, 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 we know who's going to be big, is really like an existential threat. And it's so much better. There's a lot more kind of collaborative power in coming to the table and saying, here's some intelligence that you can use to kind of like analyze what you think intuitively makes sense for you, and you make your own decisions. We're here to just provide some color. And again, we're able to share, given like your list of 200 artists that you care about, you know, here's what their reach looks like, here's what their engagement numbers look like, here's what their demographic looks like, and, you know, given that we are Next Big Sound, we spend a lot of time trying to predict who's going to be the next big sound. Here's who we think is really going to be likely to be successful 6, 9 months down the road when your campaign is actually hitting the airwaves. We've had a lot of fantastic luck and had some huge partners going through that. And one of our favorites is American Express. We've given advice to them for the past 2 or 3 years on who to partner with for their unstaged event. We've also analyzed the success of those different unstaged events to say, you know, which artists have done well, which haven't done well, but usually to be able to say, this is the kind of impact that the partnership with American Express has. And what's cruel to know, it's not just for American Express to understand whether or not they're spending their money effectively, but to be able to take that story, bring it to an artist, and tell them, this is why you should be partnering with American Express. We offer this kind of access, this kind of bump in sales figures. Come to the table with us. So finally, you know, closing thoughts. Streaming numbers are growing huge, and we predict that they're just going to keep growing a lot for the future. Social numbers are growing. We see no slowdown. Facebook, Twitter, or all the rest. And what's really exciting for the music industry is that transparency is growing with companies like Next Big Sound and, you know, through us, Pandora, sharing a lot more data to musicians. Musicians are more empowered than they ever have been to kind of like take the reins, know how they're doing well, grow their numbers, and become a lot more successful. Thank you. That's all I have.